Hey there, welcome to Ben's Eco Adventure and welcome to a discussion about the brutal economics of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, otherwise known as PHEVs. Let's get into it. So today I'm going to talk about why I think that PHEVs are never going to really expand beyond just a very niche market. If you're interested in electrified transportation generally, I think you're really going to want to watch this video because I've got a lot of stuff to share with you. If it's not so much your thing, I hope you'll keep watching and maybe enjoy a nice nap. First of all, I think I should explain what is a plug-in hybrid or PHEV. A plug-in hybrid is a vehicle that has both an internal combustion engine and an electric powertrain, but it's different from what people commonly know as hybrids because you can actually plug them in. And what that does is that'll charge the high voltage battery and you can drive for maybe anywhere between say 20 to 50 miles, very much depends on the model and the kind of driving you do. And you can do that all on electric power alone without using any gasoline. So that's appealing for people who have cheap electricity and can charge at home. And that's an important point. If you are not able to charge at home or possibly at work or something where you can access a plug pretty much every day, you should not buy a plug-in hybrid. It is not the right car for you. Behind me, you'll see a Dodge Hornet RT. That's their plug-in hybrid vehicle. And I'm gonna have a more detailed review on this car. So make sure you're subscribed for that because it's interesting. You're not gonna wanna miss it. So as I mentioned, plug-in hybrids are for people who can charge at home or at work, but perhaps they wanna go on longer trips frequently, away from infrastructure and that kind of stuff. And there is definitely a market for that. It's fairly small. I have a dear friend who fits into those categories perfectly. But for most people, if you're not able to charge at home at this moment, right now, probably a regular conventional hybrid is the best choice for you. And if you are able to charge at home, I think you'll probably be surprised at how relatively easy it is to road trip an electric vehicle now. The charging infrastructure, as much noise is being made about it, it's pretty widespread. It works pretty well. And I think we're going to see it only get better as time goes on. Let's take a step back for a moment and kind of go on a tangent. So what if I told you that all modern gasoline cars cost about the same amount of money to build? That seems like a wild statement, right? But it's kind of true. Now, obviously, if you're using fancy materials, nice leather, very luxurious wood in a luxury car, yeah, that's going to cost more than cheap hard plastics in an economy car. But there are still a lot of things that the cheap economy car and the luxury car have in common. Let's think about it. Like they all need a steering wheel. They all need airbags. They all need mirrors. They need glass. They all have to be crash tested and they all have to go through the cycle of research and development, durability testing, crash testing, all of that kind of stuff. And also, very importantly, they need to go through emissions testing, and we're going to come back to that. So with all cars, regardless of how they're powered, it's important for the company to have scale. That is, the more cars they can sell of a particular model, the better off they'll be because they'll amortize the research and development and tooling costs over a much larger number of vehicles. Now I'm going to contradict myself a little bit. While I did say earlier that gasoline cars cost kind of the same amount to build regardless, that is not true for plug-in hybrids. These cars have basically two entirely separate powertrains. Now they do all work together in the end, and that is certainly a big cost and integration by itself. But consider with an EV, you have the savings. You don't have all the things in your engine. You don't have exhaust pipes. You don't have transmissions and that kind of things that are expensive. You just have the battery, inverter, motor, electronics. With a conventional gasoline car, you just have all that stuff. This has all of those things all together. And even though plug-in hybrids have smaller battery packs than a full electric vehicle, the cost differential isn't quite as much as you might think. Consider that even though, yes, you're using fewer battery cells, you still have to put those cells into a pack, and that requires a certain amount of labor or robots or whatever, however you're doing that. You still need an inverter, you still need a motor, and those savings might be small, but they're really not that significant. And going back to emissions testing, as I mentioned earlier, that's another thing. This vehicle has the same 1.3 liter four-cylinder Fiat engine as a Jeep Renegade. However, even though Stellantis certainly had to go through emission certification on the 1.3 and the Renegade, they had to go through an entirely separate process for this car, even though it's the same engine. The reason being the way this operates is quite different than a conventional gasoline car. Not only do they have to do exhaust emissions testing, but they also need to do range testing for the electric part of the car. So in very rough terms, a plug-in hybrid vehicle is going to cost about, very roughly, $12,000 more than a conventional gasoline-powered car. Some plug-in hybrids do qualify for the federal tax credit of $7,500. This one doesn't if you buy it because it's made in Italy. If you lease it, you should get it, but I did notice that as of this filming, Stellantis is only giving you $6,500 and keeping that other $1,000 for themselves. Even if you did get the full $7,500 tax credit, you would still be, maybe not for this car exactly, but again in rough terms, looking at that $12,000 premium, $4,500 short on the cost that it would take to buy one. Now, obviously, every car is different and you can't really exactly compare apples to apples, but let's just pretend you can for a second. And note that the fuel savings on this car, this is a window sticker, over the course of 5 years, you'll save about $3,000 in fuel costs compared to the average vehicle. So for this particular car, at least at MSRP, the math doesn't math. This just doesn't pencil out in terms of cost savings. And to be clear, it might pencil out on other cars like the Toyota Prius Prime or maybe the Ford Escape plug-in hybrid, but you'll have to look at each one individually. As a result, probably unsurprisingly, these Hornets have been sitting on dealer lots. This particular one that I'm testing for a few days has been on the lot for almost a year. So in order for Stellantis to really move these cars, they're going to have to discount them big. Keep in mind that this car was maybe, at sticker price, marginally profitable for them. And they're already discounting it a little bit. And I think they're going to have to go a lot more. This car is not going to be good for the company's bottom line. And as a result, I think more importantly, talking about electrified transportation, they're not going to want to build a lot of these cars. We're also seeing that too, somewhat with Toyota. The Toyota RAV4 Prime has been in very short supply since it hit the market a few years ago. And I think that is a very deliberate choice by Toyota. They could build more, but if they keep the supply very restricted, they make sure that they can at least break even, because those cars tend to cost about $50,000. There's a large premium over the non-plug-in RAV4 on the Primes. Bigger picture, where does that leave us? Well, as you can see, the economics of plug-in hybrids are very difficult, especially when we're talking about small cars and cars that people would just generally expect to be comparable in cost to a conventional internal combustion vehicle. That means that plug-in hybrids are very unlikely to break out of the market beyond luxury cars, where they can kind of stuff the cost in a little bit more and the profit margins are a little bit better, or possibly pickup trucks, where again, margins on pickup trucks are generally quite good. And you can actually make a very good use case on a pickup truck for this kind of powertrain, particularly if you're towing. The other thing now is that full electric vehicles have basically reached price parity and are kind of moving past where plug-in hybrids are at, you can buy a Hyundai Ioniq 5 or a Chevrolet Equinox EV for less money than this car. And I think given that those cars are both larger and more practical, most Americans at least are going to choose those vehicles over this one. And as for the issue of road tripping, that still gets a lot of press about, oh, EVs are difficult to road trip. I've done it so many times now, I can pretty confidently say they're not that difficult to road trip. The infrastructure is getting vastly better. And in my experience, a 15-20 minute break after a few hours of driving is really not that big of a deal. That's of course in the case of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 that can charge really fast. Obviously, as many of you know, I have a Bolt EUV. That does take longer to charge, but most people aren't buying a Bolt EUV to go on road trips as their only car. Well, that about wraps up my video. I hope you found it insightful, and if you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. It really does help out. And again, make sure you're subscribed because I'm going to have a lot more to say about this Hornet in a little bit. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching.